Hello, and welcome to SIGCSE Morning Coffee, the show covering everything going on with the 2021 SIGCSE Technical Symposium. From Dayton, Ohio, I'm Larry Merkel.
And from Long Beach, California, I am Alvaro Monge. So, Larry, now we have a morning show.
We do indeed.
Yeah, and it's especially early for me, this morning coffee show. Now, the symposium hasn't actually started yet. What should we talk about? What's something that other shows have?
Not really much of a TV person, but I think these kinds of shows kind of do weather reports. Mark, how's the weather where you are?
It's nice. It's nice.
Thanks, Mark. So, what else?
How about a mailbag? And we actually have a question here from Twitter, from Elise Dietrich. That's at @edietrich on Twitter. She says, can you unpack attendee expectations for paper sessions? It seems like we get a 5-minute recap and need to pre-watch videos to see the full presentation. So, Alvaro?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking that, Elise. Certainly, all the paper presentations have pre-recorded videos. So the authors did an amazing job of recording video presentations, submitting them, and the Pathable team and the SIGCSE volunteers also did a tremendous job reviewing them, making sure they were the right format, et cetera. So yes, what we want attendees to do is to go to Pathable, find the paper you're interested in, watch the pre-recorded presentation, and then for the live presentation, what we're asking presenters to do is take 5 minutes that will do a recap of their presentation. Some of them may choose to do 10 minutes, right? It's really 20 minutes are for the presenters, but what we have asked them to do is to do a 5-minute recap, and then to open it up for discussion, for Q&A. So this was all based on feedback that we got from the community, where we're all doing Zoom and right, we're all having to sit through meetings and so on, and it's the engagement that we really sometimes miss out on. So therefore, that's why we chose the format that we have. So does that sound about right, Larry? Is that any questions? Or?
It does. Suppose I'm interested in seeing a paper presented. I should go watch the video and have that in my mind already when I show up for the session. But when can I actually watch the video?
You can do so now, right? Once you have, all you have to do is go to the Pathable SIGCSE website, use your CVent email to log in, go through the program, find the paper session, the paper you're interested in. Over on the right side, there will be a sidebar that has tabs for the chat, poll, and files. In the files tab is where you will find the videos that you can then watch. And you can actually start engaging right away. I mean, if you have a question already, you could start, you can post that question on the chat. So that's a good place to start engaging the presenters.
So what I'm hearing is instead of just going and hearing 20 minutes of a presentation followed by a few minutes of Q&A, I actually get to watch the full presentation, think about it, come up with questions, put them into the chat, then go see a quick recap and engage in 10 or 15 minutes of thoughtful Q&A with the authors. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we believe that this will give us just deeper discussions because of the increased amount of time for the Q&A. And remember, you can, once you have, once a presentation of a paper finishes in one paper session, if you have another paper that you're interested, in a different paper session, then you'll go to Pathable, go to that session and jump into that paper session.
Awesome. Well, Elise, thank you again for the question, and we hope we've clarified those expectations for you.
We would also like to thank our supporters of the SIGCSE Technical Symposium. Make sure to check out their exhibits and sessions throughout the week.
And after the break, we'll be back with the interview. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Joining us now from Westchester County, New York, is Leighann DeLyser, co-founder and executive director of CS4All. Leighann, welcome to SIGCSE Morning Coffee. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Larry. It's so great to be here and to virtually see you and be ready for SIGCSE.
So I hear you're actually going to SIGCSE.
Well, kind of. Trying to balance both running CS4All and being a mom and taking care of a family during 2020 means a lot of challenging things if you're trying to immerse yourself. So together with Diane Levitt and Maya Israel, two other SIGCSE members, we are renting a house, quarantining, testing, doing everything we possibly can to get there safely, and then going to basically conference together for a week. So stay tuned for our social media for fun hijinks from the SIGCSE house.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I wish I could be there. And it's completely consistent with your long time commitment to SIGCSE. I think the first time that we met was when you were a student volunteer with the registration desk in 2005. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in computing in the first place and then in computing education?
Absolutely. I grew up in rural America. And so as you can imagine, as a smart young woman who won math and science competitions and was voted most likely to be on Jeopardy in my senior class, I was going to be a teacher. That was the prescribed thing that you did as a young woman. And so I went and I studied math education at Pace University. And I was first generation college. So I paid for my own undergraduate degree, mostly by working on campus. And I got connected to several departments where I quickly became a student assistant and then took over their database systems and learned how to write code, make data useful, bring information to the career counselors who are trying to place other students in jobs and or internships. And it really sparked this thing in me that the shape of information was really important to everybody. And so I paid for my undergraduate degree working in database systems. And when I started to teach, I leveraged that experience to not only teach mathematics, but also teach computer science in my very first teaching job in South Florida.
Fantastic. And then somewhere along the way, you found your way into graduate school and you went from there. Can you tell us how you wound up connecting up with CS4All?
Yeah, so my journey is one, and when I talk to a lot of young women, I always say, don't sit quietly in rooms. And when life asks you to volunteer, raise your hand. So I didn't sit quietly in rooms. And when you met me, Larry, I wasn't a student volunteer. I was actually a teacher who had signed up for the volunteer role because I could get a discount on my registration to SIGCSE. It wasn't a program that SIGCSE had. I just asked and said, can you let me do this? And will you give me some discount? I served as the K-12 liaison for SIGCSE for a long time. I wrote a couple of textbooks and had an opportunity through one of those why not moments to go to Carnegie Mellon. So I was at SIGCSE in the exhibit hall talking to Scott McElfresh, who I knew from the AP reading. And he was talking about a program at Carnegie Mellon where they invite community college faculty to teach their intro courses at CMU and experience the big R1 institution. And I turned to him and I go, hey, you ever think about doing that with a high school teacher? He's like, sure, why not? And so I ended up at CMU teaching introductory classes. And then first semester, I took 5 additional courses at the same time because I didn't have a degree in computer science. So I took undergrad algorithms, I took intelligent robotics, their data structures, whatever else I could fit in. So I was teaching 5 sections and taking 5 sections at the same time on this, like, I'm only going to be here for a short amount of time and I just want to soak it all up as fast as I possibly can. And I started to get involved in research because it's Carnegie Mellon, right? How do you live and breathe in that environment and not ask questions about why it works in a classroom, how it works in a classroom. And so I applied to CMU to their PhD program in computer science. There's this nifty little paragraph at their end of their PhD handbook that says, if you don't fit into any of our buckets, we think you can make your own. We're not sure it's going to hold water, but you can try. And so I built a self-defined interdisciplinary program between computer science and cognitive psychology with funding from the US Department of Education, the Institute of Education Sciences, to be a peer fellow at CMU. And to any CMU, or not, to anyone out there who has undergraduates who might be interested in education research, I highly recommend they check out the peer program at CMU. It is phenomenal, and where I built all of my research muscles in this high quality program. So they let me in, which surprised the heck out of me. And then I spent 5 years in their PhD program straddling this line between computer science and HCI and data science and intelligent tutoring systems and cognitive psychology. And what really interested me was the notion of feedback. As a teacher, as I'm sure many of our SIGCSE members know, feedback to your students is critical. It's how they learn and grow. And the way that we provide it not only helps them learn, but affects them emotionally and keeps them engaged in our classes and makes them want to persist when it gets really hard, which it's supposed to, right? So I studied feedback and the way our feedback mechanisms within problem-based learning environments, intelligent tutoring systems, help students do better. And came out the other end and got engaged around the work that was just starting to get off the ground in New York City with a venture capitalist named Fred Wilson and a new school called the Academy for Software Engineering. And I helped Fred open that new school in New York City, and it turned from a school into a nonprofit, CSNYC, into a movement. And now there's over 200,000 students enrolled in computer science in New York City based on the trajectory of work that started back then.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Over what period of time?
So we launched the Academy for Software Engineering in 2012. So it's been almost a decade worth of work. Although the capital campaign with the requirement to teach computer science, which is really driving the increase of those numbers based on amazing work from the New York City Department of Education, really started in 2015.
And you've been with the program in its various forms since its inception.
Yeah, I joke and say that I'm employee -1 of CSNYC because before there was a nonprofit, Fred gifted my salary to the school so that I could work there full time and wasn't going to go look for faculty jobs since I was all but dissertation, which I think was phenomenal for me and really helped connect me strongly to the work in New York. And I started in that role at the school, and I moved to project manager at CSNYC, and then its director of education and research, and then to managing partner with Michael Preston when we shifted over fully to CSforALL on a small NSF grant that we got that just we took to the big time. And now I'm the sole executive director of CSforALL.
That sounds great, Leighann. But given so much that CSforALL does, we certainly wonder how big this team is that you are the director of.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We couldn't do anything at CS4All without a team. So I am super proud to lead a team of about 12 individuals. We have some open roles right now. So if anybody out there is interested in coming to work for us, take a peek at our jobs page. But we leverage a larger community. So our small team leverages a membership of over 700 individuals and institutions, many of which are going to be here at SIGCSE this week. And we do this work together. Nobody has to do this work alone. And I think that that's really important to the success of CS4All, is that we are a community reaching for the same outcomes of diversity, inclusion, and equity, so that all kids get these fundamental learning experiences in computer science and have the opportunity to pursue interest-driven, deep learning opportunities as well.
Yeah, and that's amazing that all the work the team does. And what I want to know, we really thought of you, you for two reasons: the work on CS4All, but also the DEI committee that was established, given the events that took place last year, but also the many years, right, of racial inequality. So I wonder if you can talk to us about how the DEI committee got established. How did you sort of get to work in its initial formation, so that we can then spend a few minutes talking about that committee.
Absolutely. As I mentioned to Larry, when life asks you to raise your hand, raise your hand. And I am all in for the work that the DEI committee stands for. At CS4All, we're all about systems change, right? There's so many educators, community members who are focused on doing the work on the ground for kids, right? And it's super important. And there's so many people out there who are making change for teachers, providing them high quality professional learning or curriculum that they can use in their classrooms. But those students and those teachers inhabit systems. They move through institutions. And one of the most important things for me is that those institutions should not be a roadblock for all of that amazing effort that everyone else is doing. And so the work of the DEI committee at SIGCSE is an important part of my personal goal to change systems to make the world a more equitable place for students, teachers, researchers, everyone. And I think the really biggest challenge is that in an institution like SIGCSE, just as our educational institutions, we often forget how we got here. So SIGCSE is an academic community, right? We are researchers fundamentally committed to sharing high quality research with each other. But we forget that the legacy of academia is Eurocentric and very much built on standards and norms that were defined by a subset of folks and not the full body of humans that now participate in those institutions. One of our heroes, one of my personal heroes, Grace Hopper, said, the most dangerous phrase in the language is that we've always done it this way. We talk about that all the time for technological innovation. We don't think about what that means when it comes to institutional change. The notion that our internal routines, our internal accepted norms perpetrate a system creates the most diffuse excuses for not reforming. It's not my fault. I'm not a bad actor. There's no one person we can point to say, that's the problem, right? And so that collective ownership, that acknowledgement that the things that we believe are the level playing field were actually built to exclude. Whether it be our introductory courses that were a long time ago defined to weed out all but a select few, or the institutions that sit above them, who have defined meritocracy from a Eurocentric point of view, which excludes. It's the hardest possible thing to fix is when every single person in the system can say, it's not me.
Yeah, and that is certainly a difficult, I mean, a challenge, right? Because it's been years that that system has been created, that's been built up, and like you said, people don't recognize necessarily the role perhaps that they have, or how much they could do themselves to make that change possible. So what is then the DEI's committee's role? How is it defined? How does it work with the SIGCSE board? Does it then trickle up to ACM at that level? Can you talk to us about, sort of its position within the org?
Yeah, so the SIGCSE board made a call to the SIGCSE community last year for anyone willing to take on this definitional work. And I just want to be clear that we're still in the definitional stage. Together with Nikki Washington, she and I are co-chairing this effort. We are not necessarily the committee right now, but instead we are working to listen to the community, identify where the pain points are, what the biggest challenges are, and then construct a charge for the committee, as well as a suggested list of committee members. And so if you did not attend our session on Friday about the DEI committee, where we're sharing what came out of the survey that we conducted, and you would like to participate, please reach out to me or Nikki. I'm leighann at CSforALL.org. I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation, talk to you about the work and how you can get engaged as a SIGCSE member. Our job is to think about the pieces of SIGCSE, right? Not just from a perspective that ACM takes in terms of their big conference or SIG statements about inclusion and diversity. We're also thinking about that on the ACM level. I'm part of the ed board for ACM and part of their DEI committee work as well. So I'm plugged into the different levels here. Yep. The work at SIGCSE specific is to think about and to create opportunities for us to learn new muscles. I'm kind of thinking about it like a training, right? When you go and work out in the gym, the very first time you do a curl, it feels uncomfortable. The weight you're using is probably super light. You're like, I know I should work this muscle, but oh man. And then you're sore afterwards if you've done it right, right? Yep. It's gonna be painful for a little bit, but you know it's good for you, so you go back and do it again on the next arms day. Well, the DEI committee is going to be a little bit like that. We know that it's good for us. We also know that we're going to have to start with some easy, lightweight things. So we're going to ask questions. What is the relative participation of historically marginalized communities, BIPOC individuals within the SIGCSE structure? There definitely was acknowledgement by many people last year with the board candidates that we don't have a fully diverse SIGCSE board. And you can't like wave a magic wand and make that happen. It's just like working out. You have to build the muscles over time. So how do we get people into the pipeline where they feel like they are a leader in the community and should stand for the board? How do we also take a look at, for example, the relative distribution of folks who are asked to chair sessions? Right? I did a quick analysis of the agenda in 2019 and found that 89% of the session chairs were either white or European. Just from quick perception, so that's a rough number. I did not look up everybody's picture on Google image search. But for a global conference, we would expect larger participation of communities outside of just Europe and white Americans, right? So doing things like asking questions of our data, exposing gaps like that one, and then building the muscle so that you don't need someone to say, hey, did you look at it this way? It becomes part of the questioning that the chairs, the program chairs, the committee does, no matter what, for the technical symposium, for the other SIGCSE conferences. My understanding is that this committee will report directly to the SIGCSE board and will be able to make recommendations and have access to data that is private and obviously will not be shared. Things like the relative acceptance rates of papers, not just for ethnicity or color of the faculty who are proposing them, but also the relative institutions that support those faculty, where they are in the world, and how well SIGCSE across all of its conferences is serving the larger global community. So our job is to both think about the data and how we can use the data to expose weaknesses and question the root causes of some of those inequities, right? Which may not always be SIGCSE's job to fix. Just going to be super clear about that. And then how do we also think about the overall culture of SIGCSE? And some of the responses we got to the survey, I think, speak to this culture. Over the last few years, we've heard things like the memo from the Google employee who questioned whether women were even biologically qualified to represent themselves in tech careers at the same level as men, right? We know that those thoughts still exist in many places, and they pervade the SIGCSE community as well. Some of our survey responses were echoes of this notion that SIGCSE is entirely a meritocracy with no problems inherent in its systems. And I think there is just work to be done to help lift up the places where SIGCSE itself can do better. And how do we all get a little bit better? How do we all do a few more curls, maybe come out sore for a day or two, but are stronger for it on the other end?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So you mentioned, sorry. So you mentioned that the DEI committee is going to be reporting directly to the board. I'm wondering what's the communication going to be like between the DEI committee and the conference organizing committee? So, for example, I'm just getting started together with my co-chairs on putting together the committee for 2022. Love to hear all the best advice that I can, and I'm wondering if there's a faster way to get it than waiting for it to filter through the board and then the board liaison and then having questions. Do we have to have them as a go-between, or is there going to be some direct interaction?
Absolutely. So first of all, our committee are members of SIGCSE. And going back to that other notion of not sitting quietly in rooms, I have a great example from this year's SIGCSE, actually, of where Nikki and I identified a problem and reached out. Even though the committee isn't formed, we felt it was worthwhile saying something. So CSforALL every year prepares a guide to SIGCSE where we pull out all the K-12 relevant sections and things that would be of interest to our research practice partnerships community from the National Science Foundation. I've put it out on Twitter for anyone who's interested in seeing it. But in doing that, it makes me perceive the agenda in a slightly more granular way. And so we had looked at all of the sessions and identified that there was a concentration of sections on racial justice over 2 days, and they basically were all in the same time slot. Like if you, as a researcher or as a SIGCSE member, were really interested in racial justice issues, of the 12 sessions that exist, so SIGCSE is doing a great job in saying yes to those proposals. They were spread over 4 sections, 4 paper segments. And so we reached out immediately. We said, hey, we noticed this clustering. Here are 2 time slots that don't have any of these segments. Is there a possible way to adjust the program, acknowledging that that's hard to do at this stage in the game? And hopefully if there's a committee, they'll do that earlier next year. And Alvaro was able to move one. So obviously there's a lot of calculus involved in the SIGCSE schedule. I know myself have been a burden in terms of trying to find segments, so I'm not supposed to be in 3 places at the same time. But I think that was a really important example of where we had noticed something, reached out to the committee in real time, and got a response and a change that is going to make a small difference, at least in a starting place.
Yeah, that was great. I'm glad you reached out and that we were able to take action, and that there was presenters that were, agreeable to a change. I think it will improve their, their slot as well. So Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern is the DEI session. Can you tell us briefly who will be presenting, and just kind of a brief preview of what attendees will expect?
Thanks for the question. So Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on March 12th, we are going to present the results of the community survey that we did last fall, that I know several SIGCSE members participated in, and do an open session. We really want to build a charge for this community grounded in the voices of SIGCSE, right? SIGCSE is a community of the researchers together. And so the challenges, the DEI work is going to be grounded in the voices of the community itself and the challenges that they see. And we'll build a charge to the community and to the committee. And then hopefully everyone who shows up, you're not signing up for the committee if you show up. We'd love to have you, whether you want to volunteer or not. But we also hope to get some more folks onto the committee to help us think through this work, do a little bit of training, and whether your desire is to dig into the data or to help make change. We're happy to have both workers who are going to help behind the scenes with the data and those who will lead the charge within the SIGCSE community.
That sounds great. As we conclude this interview, is there anything you'd like to leave for just a larger community?
Yeah, I'd like us all to remember something very specific. Equity is not a resting state in any system. The minute we take our eye off of the data, it's going to slide. I've been talking a lot for the last few months about equity being like a squishy ball. You know, those squishy balls you have, if you squeeze our systems really hard, you can change them into something new. But the minute you release that pressure and let go, it returns back to its original state. And so equity and justice need to embed themselves in our routines. It is not a singular action, but the repeated view that we have and the way we consider it every single day to keep that squishy ball in that changed shape that we want to hold, because we're just going to be stronger if everybody gets their perspective and voice included as we work to bring students of every background, nationality, and color into computer science education in a way that makes this world a better place. That's great. Thanks. Larry?
Wow, Leighann, it has been so great to catch up with you and to hear about all the great stuff you're doing with CSforALL and with the DEI committee. Thank you so much for joining us today on SIGCSE Morning Coffee. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the DEI session.
Thank you, everybody. And I can't wait to see both you and the larger SIGCSE community there as we begin to train those muscles and make us stronger.
Thank you so much for watching.
Watch for the next episode on YouTube and in Pathable, and we can't wait to see you at the symposium.